Hi, I'm Des McWilliam, and each year I would sail on maybe 40, 50 yachts. And each week I come to the realization that there are maybe 4 or 5 of those boats that I'd happily go on to next week in order to be with the same crew on the same boat. A lot of the problem is shouting and roaring and the non-transfer of information between the people on board. I really believe that when you're sailing on a boat, you should know the names of all the people on that boat, so that when you want to have something done or when you want to have some information, you can say, Karen, ease the halyard tension. And when you say ease the halyard tension, it's a really good idea to give a specific amount by which you want it done. So you say ease the halyard tension 3 inches, or if they're a younger person, 75 millimeters, so that they know exactly what's going to happen and they're not left to make a decision on their own and feel unsure and unsecure about it. When you're sailing with somebody who's brand new, the worst thing that can happen is that they're left to sit on the weather rail with nothing to do, getting cold, getting wet, and really not understanding what on earth is going on. So they should be helped by, first of all, telling them what's going to happen before it happens, and secondly, by giving them a job like looking for gusts coming down. If they get it wrong, don't be shouting at them because of that, because it's a bit of a skill that they can acquire, but anybody can see a gust coming across the water if they're tutored in the right way. When you're sailing the boat and you're trying to get the best out of the boat's performance, your best equipment is the crew.
And the standard general car position is with the puller at showing 4 holes behind the car, and if you want to depower the sail you move it back 2 holes, and if you want to power up the sail move it 1 forward. Overpowered conditions are over 15 knots true wind speed. Underpowered conditions are under 8 knots true wind speed.
There is a common misconception that the more halyard tension you have, the higher you point, where in fact the exact opposite is true. In flat water and light airs, you should have little horizontal wrinkles behind the luff tape on the head sail, and you should only wind that wrinkle out once the water begins to get choppy.
Generally in underpowered conditions you want to sail with a few horizontal creases off the luff, so a soft halyard tension up to about 8 knots of breeze. Once you get to 10 knots of breeze you want to get rid of those creases, horizontal creases, so you can't see any creases off the luff, and that should suit you all the way through the conditions.
Now, we all are told that the correct thing to do is to have the 2 clews at an equal height, but that's actually quite hard to see when one clew is round behind the mainsail. So the simple way to deal with it is to look at the centre seam that runs down the middle of the spinnaker, and it's generally the seam that at the bottom of the sail has the Sailmaker's logo halfway up that seam. If you keep that seam parallel to the mast, then the 2 clews must necessarily be parallel on a run. So if you look and see that the top of that seam is leaning away from the mast, then you need to raise the pole up in the air, and if that seam is leaning in towards the mast as it goes up, then you need to lower the pole.
Mainsail setup, obviously underpowered conditions you don't really want any backstay on at all. In overpowered, once the boat starts to become powered up you need to start pulling a little bit of backstay on. You probably want about 50% backstay and 13 knots true. Once we get to sort of 14, 15, 16 knots true we're probably looking for max backstay. You'll know if you've got too much backstay because you'll get a crease from the clew of the mainsail into the spreaders. That's obviously too much backstay. You'll then need to release the backstay a little bit to get rid of that crease.
If the spinnaker is curling in the head first, then the pole is too low. If the spinnaker is curling in the foot first, down at the luff, down at the top of the pole is too high. If the spinnaker is set correctly, it will curl first at the first horizontal seam between the head and the middle panels, and it'll fold in there nicely and sweetly.
We generally set the Sigma 33 up with about 3 to 4 inches of pre-bend, which is mast bend on the dock in the middle of the mast.
When you go round the top mark, the normal thing to do is to bang the pole at 90 degrees to the Windex, and that's a very good starting point. But after that, if you're on a reach or a run, Look to see if the luff of the spinnaker is leaning out away from the end of the pole or trying to pull in towards the mast. Ideally, the luff of the spinnaker should be parallel to the mast, so that when it's set, if I am the mast and my arm is the luff of the spinnaker, if the pole is too far forward, the luff will roll away from the mast, and if the pole is too far aft, the luff will roll in towards the mast, and your job as the pole trimmer is to keep the luff parallel to the mast.